Hey everyone. So I'm starting a new podcast that I'm calling the NoochieCast. And as a bit of a precursor to that, I wanted to review a couple games that I've played recently and, just kind of have a discussion about them, a little bit of a review discussion. And those two games are Death Stranding and The Evil Within. So I'm going to do this video about Death Stranding, and I'm going to have another one about The Evil Within. They're both going to be pretty long form, but mostly just me rambling and ranting. Death Stranding, as you'll come to know, I really liked, and The Evil Within I really did not like. So, so this is effectively going to be episode 0 and 0B for the NoochieCast, which is going to release every Friday. So, so here's kind of what I thought about Death Stranding. I put in about 50 hours now, and for this video I want to talk about why it's one of my games of the year for 2019. So, as we all know, Death Stranding is made primarily in the mind of Hideo Kojima, who just no one can crack. No one understands this man. And he is one of the great auteurs in gaming, and one of the real only ones that's left. There are people like a Ken Levine, people like that are other great auteurs in gaming. Maybe like a Lucas Pope, if you want to think about it like that. But Kojima is certainly the biggest auteur in that sense of the word, and he really took this opportunity to create something from scratch where he had no prior handcuffs. When you look at something like your Solid series, where he could do whatever he wanted, but he still had a story that he had to keep in continuity. And then he comes here, he splits from Konami, becomes his own studio, and just creates whatever he wants. I really feel that a game like Death Stranding could not have been made without Kojima's name behind it, because it's so ambitious and it's just so different. It's ultimately one of the most fascinating games I've ever played. Not even talking about quality, I'm 5-10 minutes into this game and I'm already just baffled by how huge the scale is, how different it is from anything I've played, where I can jump back and forth from this game to something like The Outer Worlds or Star Wars, and it's the discrepancies in just how the games are made is mind-boggling. And it's legitimately one of the major reasons that I really enjoyed it, which I guess I'll just get to the point. It really is probably my game of the year for 2019, and I think that having such an interesting take on how to make a game, the kind of take that Kojima has, made it such an interesting experience just from the get-go. So I was really predisposed to like it from the start, even though going in I really had no interest. I remember him coming on stage on E3 2016, walking down that path that lights up with every step, and the crowd going wild, and me really not caring because I never had and still never have played a Metal Gear Solid game, and knowing his pedigree, but not really having connected with him in any way. But now that I've had the opportunity to play a game like that, I really understand where his reputation comes from, not necessarily from a quality perspective, but absolutely from a scope and kind of just an originality perspective. With that being said, though, I definitely understand why people don't like this game. it's like it it just takes so many ideas and kind of puts them all in this one this one package. That there are things here that people, I definitely understand, could feel bored and overwhelmed and just, you know, not having fun. And that's one question that a lot of people have asked in the the discourse surrounding this game, and that is, does a game have to be fun? And I usually would say yes to that, and honestly, I do think this game is fun, but not in necessarily a Call of Duty, open world action game where you're constantly battling enemies, because there is none of that constant action, constant battle with anything unless you count your weight management. Instead, it's the fun of this game is really in the meditation, in the kind of loneliness aspect of it, that in itself contributes to the feel that you're making a difference. And with that, the stakes of the game make it, for me, really connect. Because there was never a point during the game where I was doing whatever menial, like, retrieval quest, delivery from whatever random person, where I didn't feel like I was making a difference, because I knew that I was progressing to connect the United States, or the United Cities there, as it were. And it's a game that it really establishes those stakes well. If you think of the writing and the story of the game, there are a lot of times where it becomes kind of overbearing in how much it just exposits at you at once. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I think what it does do well is that it explains the stakes. It explains what, in a general sense, has happened right at the start, where it says, here's where we are, here's what we want to happen, here's how you can help make this happen. And you just go on doing that over the course of 50 hours. Now, of course, the story unfolds and a lot of things happen. And the story, I think, is, from what Kojima is known for, kind of fits there. It really fits into what his past has come to make him known for, in that it's really convoluted. It can be really kind of overwhelming and hard to understand at points, but at the same time, it's never particularly nonsensical. It obviously, there are a lot of parts of it that are extraordinary or supernatural, but it never doesn't make sense within the context of the game, and it legitimately made me interested in it. Like, the writing can at points feel a little, maybe not cliched, but a little, straightforward, on the nose, in a lot of the things that it's trying to say, because it's introducing this brand new world and has to get across exactly what has happened and what this world is. Whereas there are some reveals throughout the game that the game just kind of beats you over the head with it, because it needs you to know that this is a twist, and this thing that has happened, or this reveal that has happened, is not normal, and it's not what you thought was happening, but it's so convoluted that you may not have even realized it was a twist. But I think that all of it, even with some of the weird writing, it does make for a really engaging experience. It I a lot of the lore, and you really need to understand the lore to understand the story. A lot of the lore comes through in emails and interviews with certain people throughout the game, and it's kind of annoying. It may not be the right word, but a little frustrating to have to go through and read dozens of emails to understand a little bit of what's happening. But at the same time, I actively sought them out. You're not required to read the emails if you want to just go through and play the game. But I really actively wanted to read them because I was interested in the story, and I thought it was somewhat relevant and intriguing to read them. So I thought the story was actually it wasn't the most impactful throughout the game until you get to the ending, which really ties up a lot of loose ends. Although not every question is answered, in my opinion. But you get to the ending, the last couple of chapters, which it's like a 3-hour cutscene, which is kind of annoying. But you get to this series of cutscenes, and it wraps everything up and makes for a pretty conclusive, pretty emotional, impactful ending that I enjoyed generally. I think without going into too much of it, I thought there were parts of it that I was a little confused about, a little, some of it was my eyes were rolling, but I thought in general the story was really impactful, and I really enjoyed it, and it made some of the tedium of the gameplay still feel worth it. But even with that, other thing, the performances, look at the Game Awards where Mads Mikkelsen wins Best Performance, and I don't know if I agree with that necessarily, but I think that most of the performances here were really well done. I've seen a lot of praise for, I believe, I forget his name, the actor who plays Die Hard Man does really well. The Margaret Qualley playing Mama does really well. My personal favorite, who I think it's really cool, is Troy Baker. When you see this voice actor, traditionally voice actor within the industry, going up with traditional movie TV actors, it's really cool where you actually see Troy Baker's face playing Higgs. Higgs I actually thought was probably my favorite character throughout the game. I don't know what that says about me, but being probably the most traditional enemy in the game, the most traditional villain, I thought he was really interesting. He brings about some of the game's most interesting moments. I won't say some of the best moments, but they're definitely, in terms of the story beats, they're some of the most kind of intriguing, definitely memorable in terms of cutscenes. There are a couple in every chapter is named after a character, and in his chapter there are a couple cutscenes that are just absurd in a really good way. But yeah, I thought Troy Baker does such a good job. So does Mads, so does Norman Reedus, so do all these other people. With some of the writing they're given, I thought it was just a really interesting topic, a really interesting kind of case study on how all these actors performed, and most of them really hit it out of the park. But on a gameplay front, which is where you're playing this, I played it for 45-50 hours to completion, and that was I didn't do much of the lost cargo things. You can pick up cargo throughout the world and deliver it to whatever way station, whatever terminal that it needs to be delivered to. I didn't do a lot of that. I primarily stuck to the main story a little bit because I wanted to kind of push through the game, but a lot of it just because I was engaged with the story and I felt like I just wanted to keep pushing forward. But I've seen people who take 90, 100 hours to actually get through the game because they're just so engaged with picking up lost cargo and doing some of the other standard orders. And then the other thing is building roads and engaging with the social strand aspect that Kojima was so adamant about. But as a whole, I really think the gameplay works in kind of an odd sense. And like I mentioned earlier, it's in kind of a meditative, lonesome kind of, to enjoy the gameplay, you have to be ready for a game where you are going to not encounter any people for hours on end, where you're gonna be walking and your obstacles are gonna be a bunch of rocks that are in front of you, or you're gonna be driving and your obstacle is gonna be how do I get up or around or wherever, whatever, this mountain or these hills, this rock, and obviously as the game goes along, that gets a little bit easier. And I found that to be surprisingly engaging. The cargo management gets a little annoying at points. You have this just ridiculous size of cargo that you can put on your back, and it's kind of hysterical at points how big it can get, and how Norman Reedus definitely has lower back problems after it, but also just somehow can carry it for 10 kilometers just across the continent. And I felt that the gameplay of doing that was of the actual walking was surprisingly it was relaxing, and it was rewarding because anytime you'd place a ladder or place a climbing rope or walk across a bridge, both that you're getting closer and it's rewarding to get closer to whatever your goal is, but you're also helping out someone else because of the strand aspects of the game, the social aspects where all of those will be visible to other people. And I thought that over time, those were the real interesting and kind of incredible moments in the game where there are boss fights. There are moments of like shooting action, real like legitimate boss fights in the game. But I felt like the biggest boss fights were some of the missions where you had to just walk up a mountain, up a massive mountain, some like having to crawl through a few BTs, but just ultimately having to fight through the conditions and the elements and these rocks and a steep slope, and using ladders and using zip lines or other things like that would just that make that mission difficult but also rewarding to get through. And on that note, the main enemies in the game are the BTs, the essentially ghosts, I guess. It's weird, but they're the most they're really interesting. They're kind of annoying at points. You can either fight them. It gets easier to fight them throughout the game, obviously, or you can do what I did most times and just run away. which usually works. I actually never I never hit a game over screen that wasn't from some cargo that I needed to not breaking until like chapter 10, because I just would always run away from anyone if it was BTs or if it was just like some mules, some human enemies. And then now there's a point where you get to where BTs are just easy to kill and really have no threat to you at all. But I thought the BTs were legitimately terrifying a lot of the time, where you have it, you're connected to your BB, and your BB kind of alerts you to if there's a BT nearby, and any time that it would get to it would go slow-mo, and your BB's scanner that points you to which direction a BT is comes out, I would tense up. And it every single time without fail, I did that. And this happens dozens of times throughout the game, and every single time I would tense up because those BTs are just terrifying. A lot of the time, because even if I knew that I was probably going to get out alive, it was because I knew within the context of the game how terrifying they are. And yeah, I just thought that the gameplay as a whole on that front was really interesting, especially as when it comes to the BB, both in the story and in the gameplay. I thought the connection between the two was really interesting and really well done, because both in the times where you'll fall over for no reason and you will have to soothe the BB by actually physically shaking the controller. And I thought it was a really cool way to make you have to look at the BB and make an emotional connection, not only Sam but you, the player. And by the end I really did have a connection with the BB. And along that, I thought the game does not only those kind of random moments so well, but it has it has one aspect of the game that I've really not heard many people talking about, but it's the reason, pretty much the single reason that pushed it over the edge for me, that made it probably my game of the year, and one of my favorite single games for single experiences. And that is that every once in a while the game has a weird obsession with a single band called Low Roar. If you've seen the announcement trailer or subsequent trailers, you've heard their songs. But there are moments where just throughout the game, their songs will come on essentially as an accompaniment to you. It's basically the game saying, I know this is a long trip. Here's some music to play to play alongside it. And there are moments where the song will come on and it perfectly matches the moment, and it really adds a lot of emotional connection and a lot of just impact for whatever moment's happening. There's one specific moment I remember where I was heading to, I think I was in chapter 3, so I'm relatively early on in the game, and I'm heading to a city that had been talked about for a bit, and I knew was an important moment in the progression of the game. And as I was doing it, I was winding throughout some mountains and getting past it, and as I get past the hardest part of the mountain, a song comes on. I walk intentionally slowly, pretty much, just so I could kind of see this town come into view. And this song comes on, and as I pan up, the climax of the song hits, or the chorus hits, and it's just it was one of the most beautiful moments in gaming I've had this year, and I won't forget it. And those kinds of moments happen a bunch throughout the game. To the point where I really looked forward to any time a song would be played. And those moments are just some of the most impactful and memorable that really kind of bring this game to a point where you know that it had a vibe that it was going for. It knew what it wanted to be, and it absolutely nailed it. And that's why I really wanted to keep playing. Now, like I said, if you don't want to be in that mood and you really just want to be like have an action game or have a game that's just filled with icons and you just do side quests all the time, or you do a bunch of missions just back to back to back to back to back with a lot of action, this isn't the game for you. But there were so many moments in this game where I was just enthralled, where I just wanted to keep learning about the story, or I just wanted to have one more song come on, or I just wanted to even just keep building roads, keep supplying materials so I could help other people with this road that I built or with this ladder that I put down or things like that, so I could see the likes that I was getting with this social media aspect of it. And it's just every part of it was honestly astounding. Now, again, that's not to say it's a perfect game. It's certainly not. There are a lot of things that I'm not saying I wasn't bored at some points, or that I wasn't frustrated when Sam would just take a tumble down a mountain or run into a BT for no reason or things like that. But I feel like there are a lot of parts of it that overcome that and just make it one of my favorite experiences of the year. So, yeah, that's Death Stranding. It's really one of the games that has surprised me the most of this generation, honestly. It's definitely, I think, one of my favorite games of the year so far, or overall, I guess, in 2019. It's pushing it. It's a game that has really kind of made me rethink, or at least change my perspective on how games not should be told, but can be told. And I think that that's really something that will be explored throughout the next few years in gaming. And I'm really excited to see where Kojima goes next. I don't think there will be a Death Stranding 2, but I think he is, like I mentioned, one of the great auteurs in gaming. And based on this, I think he is certainly divisive, and a lot of his games are not going to be for everyone. But when you find the person that strikes a chord with for his games, it's really something special. And I think I'm one of the people that it strikes a chord with, and I think I'm just really excited to see where he goes next. So, yeah, that's Death Stranding. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.